We have the worst immigration laws of any country anywhere in the world. But they exploited the loopholes in our laws to enter the country as unaccompanied alien minors. They look so innocent. They're not innocent.
Oh, my God. Welcome back to AM Joy. Nowhere is Donald Trump's disdain for immigrants, even the youngest ones, more clearly reflected than in his administration's draconian new policy of separating undocumented families crossing the border, putting the parents in jail as they await a deportation or asylum hearing, while the children, babies included, are sent to shelters. Or in the words of White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, put into foster care or whatever. But there is a reason to be very concerned about what happens to those children. As the New York Times reported last month, the government lost track of nearly 1,500 migrant children that it placed with sponsors in the United States. Meanwhile, Trump continues to use a particular cue to signal to his base that animosity toward immigrants is warranted when he insists on repeatedly conflating the Los Angeles-originated gang MS-13 with any and all immigration issues.
We're here today to discuss the menace of MS-13. It's a menace. I called them animals the other day, and I was met with rebuke. They said, they're people. They're not people. These are animals.
And we now have even more evidence that that kind of rhetoric is indeed by design, as a way of keeping Trump's fans engaged and entertained. An extraordinary report in the Washington Post recounts a conversation between Trump and his advisors, Stephen Miller and Jared Kushner, on the night before his first address to Congress in February of 2017, in which he reluctantly agreed to soften some of his immigration language in the speech. But then, according to the Washington Post, Trump, quote, acting as if he were at a rally, he then read aloud a few made-up Hispanic names and described potential crimes they could have committed, such as rape or murder. And then he said that the crowds would roar when the criminals were thrown out of the country, as they did when he highlighted crimes by illegal immigrants at his rallies, according to a person present for the exchange, and another briefed on it later. And according to that report, Miller and Kushner laughed. Joining me now to discuss, Maria Hinojosa, president and founder of the Futuro Media Group, Karine Jean-Pierre, senior advisor for MoveOn.org, and Jason Johnson, MSNBC political contributor. Maria, that story is extraordinary because it reveals the fact that Donald Trump, even if he has these deeply ingrained attitudes toward immigrants himself, which is clearly, I mean, going through his history, he clearly probably does, he also understands that his core base has those gut feelings too, and he wants to keep stoking it and keep them thinking MS-13, gang members, all immigrants are rapists and criminals, and keep that in your mind, and he wants to keep that live.
So I'm going to speak now as less as a journalist, because though I was hearing that comment as it was coming in, I was listening live to the president on Long Island, but this is really more a statement as kind of as a human being, right? As I was reading that particular quote, and remember, I don't hide the fact that I was born in Mexico.
Yeah.
I'm an American citizen now. But I was just like, the rhetoric feels like, wait, are we in the Colosseum in Rome now? And people are cheering and roaring as they're ripping people apart, in this case, from their kids, from their families, and people are roaring this language. The problem with the language, Joy, as you know, is that there are real consequences now.
Yep.
So if you take it from these people are illegal, now the president's term, we are infiltrating. Every single child that is at the border seeking refuge is a gang member. You take that language and then you just move into, oh, wow, we lost 1,500 children we can't find. What does it matter?
Yeah.
There are a bunch of illegals, gang members, infiltrators, animals. So we have to make, the country has to make a connection with what, it's not just dog whistles. This is actual policy being made with this kind of rhetoric. And there are consequences, as you know, deep, deep consequences. So this is just a very sad moment because it's real.
Yeah.
What we are living through, this dehumanization, it's real.
And it's direct, Karine, because when he says these aren't people, these are animals, it's a way of signaling to his base, no matter what you hear next about what I'm doing, you don't have to worry about sympathizing with those people. They're not really people. They're all conflated, right? And in the case of these parents that are being ripped apart from their kids, they aren't MS-13. They are asylum seekers.
Yep.
They are mothers, for the most part, mothers and fathers, but these are parents who are being separated even from little kids. Chris Hayes did a report that everyone should watch. It's being retweeted a lot. Hopefully everyone has gotten to see it. It's on my Twitter feed. It's probably on the show feed. We will get it on if it's not. I want to play just a little piece of that interview last night, who was on All In. Her name is Laura St. John. She's a legal director at the Florence Project, which is a nonprofit in Arizona that provides free legal services to people who are in immigration custody. Take a look at this clip.
What's happening right now is really unprecedented. What we've seen here in Arizona is actually, since January, over 200 cases of parents being separated from their children. And some of these children are extremely young, as you mentioned. We've actually seen children who are 2 years old regularly. And just last week, we saw a 53-week-old infant in court without a parent.
Karine, a 53-week-old infant without a parent.
Yeah, I can't even, like, my heart is beating so hard, so fast right now, just listening to that, because it's so heartbreaking to hear that. Look, what we're seeing right now, Joy, is just a moral abomination. It's another black eye on this country that's going to take decades to wash away. You know, what Donald Trump is doing is very much like a dictatorship, authoritarian regime. It's what human rights violators do. And it is incredibly heartbreaking, as I was mentioning. But, you know, thank you so much for talking about that. Thank you for Chris Hayes last night talking about it. Thank you to you to talk about it, because we need to talk about it more. I understand we have to cover Russian oligarchs and we're obsessed with porn stars, but we have to talk about this, because if we don't, when we look back, we know that the Trump administration is not going to be, the history will not look at him kindly. But we can't sit back and look away. We need to focus. We need to actually speak up and call out our congressional members. And if they don't do anything, go out and vote in November, because this is atrocious. And another thing, too, we were talking about the language. This is dehumanizing language. And it's done on purpose, as you were mentioning, Joy, because what he's doing is a bullhorn to his base. And he's saying, these people don't matter. We don't care about these people. They're animals. So therefore, what we're signaling, what he's signaling to them is it's okay to be violent. It's okay to not care about them, because they're not real people. And it is just abhorrent. It is just morally bankrupt and just reckless what's happening. And we just have to continue to speak up and not be silent on this issue.
You know, and Jason, people, and very well said, Karine, and, you know, Jason, people are really shocked when they're hearing this policy. We you know, if you had a cursory reading of American history, you know this country has had a history of separating parents and children, from enslavement to, you know, over a century of separating Native American children from their parents and putting them in, you know, what they thought of were better, you know, white American homes, and to try to change their culture. So we know that that is a thing that has happened in America. But we also know that a thing that has happened in America is that there are masses of people who are indifferent to that suffering, who do not empathize with those people. And we are seeing the process of ensuring that there is at least a percentage of Americans who will not be moved even by the idea of a 53-week-old infant in court. For some people, that's actually working.
Yeah, Joy. I mean, look, we have to remember there's always like a 25 to 30% core of Americans who have no problem with white nationalism. I mean, these are the people who sat by for a century and a half and watched Jim Crow laws and American apartheid and drank their mint juleps and didn't care one way or another. And that's essentially what's happening. When we have been talking, you know, on the air and in writing for the last year, this is what white nationalism looks like as policy. Yep. It means leaving people in Puerto Rico. It means kicking people who've been in this country out for 25 years without due process. It means taking children at the border and throwing them into camps or whatever. It means separating children from their families under the guise that that's going to prevent people from coming here. But, Joy, it's even worse than that. And this is where the real dehumanization comes into play. 1,500 kids are lost. Yeah. 1,500 kids. We can find ISIS in the caves of North Pakistan and Afghanistan, but we can't find 1,500 kids. And at the same time, we have the White House now giving ICE permission to destroy documented reports of abuse, isolation, and sexual abuse of minors under their control. This is a problem. These children need to be found, and everybody in Congress, regardless of stripe, who cares about our national reputation and the lives of these children should be on this issue every single day.
Yeah, Maria, I mean, 1,500 children are just gone.
So it's important for us to think about the data, right? Right now, Border Patrol is the largest federal law enforcement agency in the country. Border Patrol is the largest federal law enforcement agency in the country. What does that signal? That signals that immigrants, Latinos, and all of us are targets, right? We are absolutely targets. I also want to say, Joy, to just name it, right? The powers that be dehumanized Native American children. They dehumanized the children of people who were enslaved. Then they dehumanized black children and seeing them as criminals, and they continue to do that. They dehumanized Japanese American citizens. They dehumanized LGBTQ. They are now dehumanizing Latinos and immigrants. And the reason why I'm so glad that everybody's saying it is at least we're talking about it. Because the crazy thing is that, you know, this was what I feared, Joy. Like, as a little girl, I was like, no, it could never happen that there would be, like, massive roundups of people. How did that happen in the 1940s? How did that happen? It's like, it was happening while people were having brunch, while people were watching the news, while people were going shopping. And we cannot... And I'm so glad that everybody's saying at least the silver lining is that we're talking about this. I just want to tell you, in North Carolina, I was just there. In Asheville, North Carolina, women are helping women and families. They are taking their kids from homes and walking them to school if the parents are afraid to do it. They are buying groceries and taking them to them in their home. So I agree that there's a moment of a lack of empathy. There's also opportunities right now to actually step up and show who are we as people in this country. And remember, this is not just the due process of these 56-week-old children. It's not just their due process that's being violated. It's all of ours.
Yeah.
What does that mean? People are like, oh, lost your children? No. You're a mother and your child is taken by a government that is not yours.
Yeah.
Gone. Yeah. How do you feel? That's the kind of rage that everybody should be feeling right now. And I'm kind of, you know, I'm like, it's a crisis. So does, you know, not to point any fingers, but does President Barack Obama or Michelle want to go visit? Does John Legend want to go visit? Does anybody of huge stature want to go into these places to see where these children are being held, separated from their mothers? Because this is an American crisis.
And, you know, assuming they can find where they're being held, if they can even find them. I mean, Karine Jean-Pierre, when I was living in Miami, there was the story of Chrome Detention Center and Haitian, unaccompanied Haitian children being held without their moms and dads. This is not a new thing, right? No. Children being separated in the United States. And the dehumanization isn't new. Remember shithole countries? We had to talk about that on the air. That was said as well. So, but I do wonder at what point you can recover the empathy of people if the President of the United States is signaling that they do not need to have any.
Yeah, and that's just the place that we are today. We totally went from Barack Obama, someone that many of us felt safe under and, you know, knew that he had our interest at heart, to Donald Trump, who we knew from the beginning, from 2011, that he believed in birtherism. From the day he ran his he kicked off his election, talked about horrible things that he said about Mexicans. Like, we knew he was a white nationalist. We knew he was a white supremacist, and we still allowed him in the White House, and he's still in the Oval Office, and we can argue about how he got there and all of those things, but he's still there, and he's not going to back away from that. And he has Stephen Miller, he has Jared Kushner, he has John Kelly, he has an administration that's not stopping this, that's actually adding to it, and it's really. It's just really, it's just scary to see, and that's why I keep saying we just got to stop this in November. We just got to go to the ballot box.
You begin to lose the words.
That Mark Krikorian,
it really is.
A hardliner from the Center for Immigration Studies, Ronald Mortensen, has just been added for an oversight role. Last word to you, Jason. You are out there covering elections. Is this resonating at all on the campaign trail? Are people talking about this where they vote?
Yeah. Actually, there was someone running for a congressional seat up in New York. I don't want to give them free advertisement, but I was tweeting about this earlier this week. You have people now, in particular with this issue with ICE, we have to really focus on ICE. It is the largest government agency. ICE is asking our government permission to erase and destroy documentation of abuse. You have children who were placed in homes who ended up being trafficked, and now ICE is saying, hey, White House, can we get rid of that information? And the White House is saying, fine, whatever timeline that you want. Members of Congress and people who are running for office are paying attention to this issue now. It needs to be a national moral issue everyone's paying attention to in the midterms.
Yep, and everyone needs to not pay attention to Donald Trump's attempted distractions on this. This is these are parents and little kids that are being dragged screaming away from their moms. This is happening in America right now, as Maria said, having brunch. Maria Hinojosa, Karine Jean-Pierre, Jason Johnson, all of my guests will be back. Thank you guys. And up next,